Have you ever stopped to observe that strange moment when you're endlessly scrolling through social media feeds and suddenly realize you're not really seeing anything? That odd sensation of being completely present, yet at the same time profoundly absent? It's as if your mind were functioning perfectly, processing information, making decisions about whether to like a photo or not, but beneath all this mental activity, there's a deafening silence, an emptiness you can't name, but that's always there, like a shadow accompanying every thought. You're not alone in this experience. In fact, you're experiencing one of the most fascinating and disturbing phenomena of our era, the emergence of hyperconscious minds that paradoxically feel less and less. Today, we're going to explore a territory that few dare to map, the strange inner world of a humanity that has developed the capacity to be aware of everything, but has lost the ability to be touched by anything. To understand how we arrived at this point, we need to go back in time and observe a silent transformation that has been happening in human consciousness for at least 3 centuries. For millennia, the human experience was characterized by a direct and visceral relationship with the world. When our ancestors saw the sun set, they didn't just observe the phenomenon, they were pierced by it. The beauty of nature wasn't something they contemplated in a detached way, but something that inhabited them completely. Their minds weren't separated from their bodies, and their bodies weren't separated from the world around them. Consciousness was fundamentally an integrated experience where thinking and feeling were inseparable aspects of the same vital process. But something extraordinary began to happen with the advent of modernity. Gradually, we developed the capacity to observe our own thoughts, to become spectators of our own experiences. This phenomenon, which philosophers call metacognition, was initially celebrated as the apex of human evolution. Finally, we were capable of thinking about thinking, of being conscious of our own consciousness. It was as if we had developed an internal organ capable of observing all the other organs functioning. It seemed to be the definitive triumph of the human mind over the limitations of immediate experience. During the 18th and 19th centuries, this new capacity for self-observation radically transformed how we understood ourselves. The Romantics discovered the inner world as an infinite universe to be explored. Scientists began to study the mind as an object of investigation. Artists began to portray not just the external world, but the most subtle intricacies of subjective experience. It was as if humanity had discovered a new continent, the territory of consciousness observing itself. But there's something deeply ironic in this story. The more we became capable of observing our feelings, the less we actually felt them. The more we developed the capacity to analyze our emotions, the less we were affected by them. It's as if the act of observing inevitably created a distance between the observer and the observed. And this distance, which initially seemed liberating, began to transform into something much more problematic. A subtle but persistent form of disconnection from our own emotional life. Think about your own experience. How many times have you caught yourself analyzing whether you're really happy in a moment that should be one of joy? How many times have you observed your own sadness as if you were a scientist studying an interesting but distant phenomenon. How many times have you found yourself thinking about love while you should have simply been loving? This capacity for self-observation, which should make us more conscious and free, often transforms us into spectators of our own lives. Digital technology has intensified this process in a way we're only beginning to understand. Our screens aren't just windows to the world. They're mirrors that constantly reflect our own mental activity. Every click, every like, every share is a form of observing our own tastes, preferences, and reactions. Algorithms show us refined versions of ourselves, creating an infinite loop of self-observation mediated by technology. We've become curators of our own experiences, editors of our own lives, professional observers of our own consciousness. Social media has amplified this phenomenon in an unprecedented way. We no longer live experiences, we document them, edit them, share them, and observe them being consumed by others. A beautiful landscape is no longer something we simply contemplate. It's something we photograph, filter, caption, and post. And throughout this entire process, part of our mind is constantly observing and analyzing our own reactions. Am I really impressed by this view? Is this experience authentically meaningful? Or am I just reacting to the potential for social approval? How will others interpret this post? This constant metacognition creates a mental state we could call reflexive hypervigilance. We're always on, always observing, always analyzing, but paradoxically, less and less present for direct experience. It's as if we had developed a mental control tower that constantly monitors all our internal processes, but in the process has become disconnected from the territory it's supposed to be supervising. The result is a peculiar type of modern suffering, the emptiness of the hyper-conscious mind. People who have access to more information, entertainment, and opportunities than any previous generation in human history, but who report unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, and a sense of meaninglessness. It's not that these people don't have access to rich experiences, it's that they've developed a relationship with their own experiences that makes them fundamentally inaccessible. I need to pause for a moment and ask you directly, which aspect of this description resonates most with your personal experience? Do you also feel this strange combination of being completely conscious, but at the same time profoundly disconnected from your own sensations? I know we often keep these concerns to ourselves, perhaps for fear of seeming self-indulgent or dramatic, in a world that tells us we should be grateful for what we have. But your concerns are valid and probably shared by more people than you imagine. Share in the comments, I feel this emptiness, when your voice can help create a space where we can honestly discuss this collective experience instead of suppressing it. And perhaps by naming this phenomenon together, we can begin to imagine ways to transform it. This process of disconnection doesn't happen only at the individual level, it's transforming the very structure of our societies. Observe how we consume culture today. We no longer watch a movie. We watch a movie while checking social media, reading reviews in real time, and forming opinions that will later be shared and discussed. The direct experience of art is constantly being mediated by layers of analysis and interpretation. We no longer listen to music. We create playlists that reflect our identity, analyze lyrics for meaning, and use songs as soundtracks for carefully curated versions of our lives. Language itself is changing to reflect this new reality. Notice how we talk about our emotional experiences today. We say things like, I felt that I was feeling sadness, or I had the experience of being anxious. This language, which seems more precise and sophisticated, actually reveals something profound, a distance between the self that observes and the self that's supposedly feeling. It's as if we had become simultaneous translators of our own inner lives. The wellness and self-help industry has flourished precisely to serve this new form of suffering. We offer mindfulness techniques to people who are hyper-conscious but disconnected. We promote meditation as a way to observe thoughts without judgment, without realizing that the very act of observing might be perpetuating the problem we're trying to solve. We sell apps that help people monitor their moods, as if the solution to emotional emptiness were more observation and analysis. But perhaps the most fascinating aspect of this transformation is how it affects our relationship with time and memory. When we're constantly observing and analyzing our experiences, they lose their capacity to naturally settle in our emotional memory. Instead of memories rich in sensations and feelings, we create organized and cataloged mental files, but emptied of their original vitality. It's as if we had transformed our biography into a well-curated but lifeless museum. This new form of consciousness is also fundamentally changing how we relate to each other. Romantic love, for example, has become an intensely observed and analyzed experience. We don't just love, we observe our love, question its authenticity, compare our experience with idealized representations in media, and constantly evaluate whether we're doing it right. The result is that many people report feeling like actors playing the role of love, instead of lovers genuinely involved in the experience of love. Friendship has undergone a similar transformation. Our social interactions are constantly filtered through layers of self-observation and analysis. We observe our own communication patterns, analyze group dynamics, evaluate whether we are being authentic or performative. Even spontaneity has become something we try to cultivate consciously, creating the paradox of planned and observed spontaneity. At work, this reflexive hyperconsciousness manifests as an obsession with productivity and self-optimization. We don't just do our work, we observe our own productivity, analyze our energy patterns, measure our efficiency, and constantly adjust our methods. It's as if we had become managers of ourselves, constantly supervising the employee we supposedly are. But here's the crucial question. This transformation isn't simply an individual problem that can be solved by more willpower or better self-regulation techniques. It's a fundamental change in the structure of human consciousness that emerges from the material and technological conditions of our time. The hyper-conscious but emotionally empty mind isn't a personal failure. It's an evolutionary adaptation to the demands of a world that requires constant self-monitoring, analysis, and adjustment. We live in a society that demands we simultaneously be productive workers, informed consumers, engaged citizens, available friends, attentive romantic partners, responsible parents, and self-realized individuals. To fulfill all these functions, we've developed a capacity for observation and analysis that allows us to efficiently navigate between different contexts and expectations. But the price of this efficiency is a subtle form of alienation from our own lived experience. Information technology accelerates and amplifies this process, but doesn't create it. The conditions for the emergence of the hyperconscious mind were established long before smartphones and social media. They emerged with the development of industrial capitalism, which required workers to become observers of their own productivity, with urbanization, which created social contexts that required constant adaptation and self-monitoring, and with formal education, which taught generations to analyze and categorize their own experiences instead of simply living them. So, what do we do with this understanding? How can we navigate a world that seems to demand hyperconsciousness while we simultaneously long for a more direct and vital connection with our own experience? The answer isn't to try to return to a state of pre-reflexive innocence that probably never existed in pure form, nor to passively accept this condition as inevitable. Instead, we can begin to develop what we might call an ecological consciousness about our own inner life, just as we've learned to understand our environmental impact and make more conscious choices about how we interact with the natural world. We can learn to observe our patterns of self-observation and make more intentional choices about when to observe and when to simply be present. This doesn't mean completely eliminating our capacity for metacognition, which is a valuable tool for navigating the complexity of modern life. It means, instead, developing a wiser and more balanced relationship with this capacity. We can learn to recognize the moments when self-observation is serving a genuine purpose, and the moments when it has become just a habit that disconnects us from our own vitality. An important clue can come from observing that certain activities and contexts still manage to transport us to states of more immediate presence. For some people, this happens during intense physical exercise, where the immediate demand of the body overpowers mental chatter. For others, it occurs during experiences in nature, where the vastness and beauty of the natural world temporarily silences the internal observer. For many, it happens during creative experiences, where the process of creation completely absorbs attention. What these experiences have in common is that they engage our attention in a way that makes self-observation temporarily irrelevant or impossible. They remind us that we're still capable of more integrated and vital states of consciousness, and perhaps more importantly, they show us that these states aren't a regression to a more primitive form of consciousness, but a more mature integration between our capacity for observation and our capacity for direct experience. The development of wisdom in relation to our own consciousness might involve learning to transition more fluidly and intentionally between different modes of being. There are moments when analysis and self-observation are genuinely valuable, when we're trying to understand a destructive pattern of behavior, when we're making important decisions, when we're learning new skills. And there are moments when they're just noise that prevents us from being genuinely present to what's happening. The question isn't to eliminate the internal observer, but to educate its attention. We can learn to recognize when our metacognition is serving life and when it has become an escape from life. We can develop the capacity to consciously choose when to observe and when to simply be. And we can cultivate the courage to tolerate periods of not knowing, of non-analysis, of simple presence with what's happening in our experience. This also means rethinking our relationship with technologies that amplify our tendency toward constant self-observation. We don't need to completely reject digital technology, but we can develop a more conscious and intentional relationship with it. We can create spaces and times in our lives that are protected from the constant demand for documentation, analysis, and sharing. We can practice the art of having experiences that aren't immediately transformed into content for our own or others' consumption. Perhaps more fundamentally, we can begin to question some of the cultural premises that feed this form of conscious emptiness. The idea that more consciousness is always better, the belief that we should be able to constantly optimize our experience, the expectation that all our experiences should be meaningful and transformative, the pressure to always be productive in our relationship with ourselves. There's something deeply radical in simply allowing some experiences to exist without being observed, analyzed, or improved. There's a form of political resistance in refusing the cultural demand for constant self-optimization. And there's a form of wisdom in recognizing that some aspects of human experience are better preserved when they're not excessively illuminated by the light of reflexive consciousness. This isn't a romanticization of unconsciousness or a defense of ignorance. It's a recognition that wisdom involves knowing not only how to think, but when not to think. How to observe, but also when to stop observing. How to analyze, but also when to simply accept the irreducible mystery of lived experience. If these reflections have touched something you've been feeling, but perhaps haven't found words to express, know that you're not alone. By subscribing to the channel, you'll connect with a growing community of people who share your concerns and your desire for a deeper understanding of the philosophical challenges of our time. Each week, we meet here to explore together the great questions that define our era and to seek not just understanding, but also wiser ways of living amid the transformations we're witnessing. This isn't just a channel, but a space for dialogue and collective growth. Join us on this continuous journey. Subscribe so we can continue this essential conversation about how to live with more wisdom and purpose in a world that often leaves us disoriented and divided. Because in the end, the emptiness of the hyperconscious mind isn't just a personal problem to be solved, but a symptom of a broader transformation in the human condition that we're all navigating together. And perhaps it's precisely in the shared recognition of this condition that we can find the first steps toward a wiser and more vital form of being conscious in the world, a consciousness that doesn't flee from direct experience, but embraces it. A mind that observes, but also knows when to stop observing and simply live.
The book is about the history of information. Nexus means connection, and information is connection. People often think about information as something related to truth, but most of the information in the world is not an attempt to tell the truth. It's not necessarily lies. If you think, for instance, about music, music is information, but music never tells the truth and never lies. There is a lot of bad music that people created over the years, but there is no fake music. It's just impossible to create fake music. What does music do? It connects people. It doesn't tell us the truth about something. It can make a lot of people in a club sway together to the sound of the same song. It can make a lot of soldiers march together in lockstep. It can make churchgoers to chant and to swing together. So this is what information does. It connects, and this is why the book is called Nexus, Connection.
There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. I often get this question of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future. I think it's the most common question that people ask me in interviewing, in private conversations. I always say that I'm neither. Pessimists are people who kind of think that no matter what you do, things will go badly. And this undermines human responsibility, because if no matter what we do, things will go badly, what's the point of even trying? Pessimism breeds despair. But optimism can be just as dangerous because it breeds complacency. Optimists tend to say, no matter what happens, things will turn out okay in the end. And then if this is the case, again, we don't need to take responsibility, because whether we act or don't act, whether we think very deeply about what we do or we just do the first thing that comes up in our mind, things will turn out okay. And I try to find a middle path of being responsible, which is not optimist or pessimist. It's realizing there are different futures possible ahead of us. We can draw a map of different futures, some good, some bad. Nothing is determined. There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. We are not doomed. We have immense power. We have immense resources, knowledge. We can do the right thing, but there is no guarantee. Enough people need to make good decisions in order to reach the right destination.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues and students, good evening. My name is Liu Chen, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Arts here at Peking University. It is my great honor to serve as a moderator between two distinguished scholars, Professor Yuval Harari and Professor Chengle Song. Professor Harari, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with his works, but let me introduce him briefly in the very beginning. He is the Distinguished Research Fellow at the University of Cambridge, and his publications have been best-selling ones across the world. We're very happy to have him here today.
It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It's been quite a while since I was last in China. The last time I was here was before the COVID pandemic, and previously I used to come every year, and then it became more difficult, but I'm very happy to be here again with you. I'm a historian in my training, and I see myself as a historian, but I think that history is not just the study of the past. History is also the study of the present and of the future. Historians, our real subject matter is change. We try to understand how things change, and we are now in the midst of maybe the biggest change in human history, perhaps the end of human history and the beginning of a post-human stage of history. And this raises a lot of deep philosophical questions about the very meaning of humanity. So there is really no one better to discuss it with than with a philosopher.
Okay, thank you. We are also very honored to have Professor Chengle Song with us today. Professor Cheng is the head of the Department of Philosophy here at Peking University. His expertise lies in Taoist studies. But trust me, I have known him for more than 20 years. His knowledge spans way beyond ancient texts. So we look forward to his conversations tonight as well. Professor Chen, would you like to say hello as well?
Okay, hello everyone, and it's a very precious opportunity for me to have a dialogue with Professor Harari. It is not so often happened. You have an opportunity to talk with certain writers, have so many fans and readers. It's a very amazing things. I got to know just a few days ago that his book got millions of readers only in China. It's amazing for me. Now it's a time of a screen. We are immerse ourselves in this kind of short videos and all those messages. That is not so serious. But Professor Harari composed several books with in-depth understanding and reflection on the infrastructure of human beings' culture and civilizations. And this kind of books get so many readers. And so many readers love this kind of narrative that come from history, but point out towards the future. So I think this is a very interesting thing, and I want to discuss with Professor Harari about this phenomena and what is the exactly significance of the things that have happened around his books, and also about his books Nexus, which largely lead to a very strong sense of philosophical reflection of the whole thing. We named as civilizations. You give a very cold description of the things. But let us just start with very simple questions. Just as I mentioned, in nowadays, the professional academic work is somehow becoming increasingly self-enclosed. And we actually keep indifferent about the public issues and the common challenges that are shared by humankind. We just do our things in ancient texts, and we just publish our academic papers to get our salary, and your book just remind us as professional scholars to get back to the public sphere to address the challenges and the problems that shared by the human beings. And this is largely very interesting things as a historian. You got so many readers, and you give a so strong structure interpretation of human civilization. This is a very powerful tool to shape the mindset of your reader. And this means that you burdened a very strong ethic responsibility. You shape the mindset of your reader. And if we do believe that you have this power, how we can use this power responsibly? And what is your expectation from all your books your readers can get from your books? It's a very special attitude? Is a kind of concern? Or is an expectation of the future? Or something like that? I want to hear about your points about this.
What I try to do in all my works is help people understand themselves, help people understand reality better. And it's a very delicate job because people usually rush to judge reality and to judge history, to judge the past and the present. We want to know who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, whether things are good or bad. And when we rush to judge things, we don't have time to understand them. So in my writing, I try to write history without villains, without good guys and bad guys, but to understand the deep process of change. And I sometimes think about history maybe as a kind of collective therapy for humanity. I go to therapy every week. I have a weekly session. And people can wonder, why do people need to go to therapy? I mean, the subject matter in therapy is myself. Who knows myself better than me? Why do I need to go to some stranger to learn about myself? I mean, this is ridiculous. But it's not. Because yes, I know more about myself than any other person perhaps, but there are so many things I don't want to know about myself. That yet I have access to all the data, to the memories, to the daily events, but I reject. I mean, some things I really like to know about myself, but the more painful, the darker episodes in my life, the more painful things I do in the present, it's very difficult for a person to acknowledge that about oneself. Like if you're in a relationship and there is a problem in a relationship, so you ask, and people would say, I'm perfect. It's the other person who is causing all the problem. If only the other person changed a little, behaved differently, everything would be perfect. And you ask the other person, they would say exactly the same thing. I'm perfect. It's my husband, it's my wife that is causing all the problem in our household. So this is why you need to go to therapy. So to get professional help, to realize some very deep truths about yourself that are too difficult or too painful to acknowledge. And history is like therapy for entire civilizations or for the whole of humankind. Also, entire nations often don't want to acknowledge dark episodes in their past or dark things they are doing right now. Entire civilizations, the same. You ask, and almost every nation, almost every country would say, we are perfect. All the problems are because of the other nations. All the problems are because of the other civilizations, of the other cultures. And I think the responsible job of historians is to, and not to share blame, but to simply help people understand better the big processes and the deep sources of the problems in the world. And this is a big responsibility.
This is very interesting. I just cannot agree more about your points because, you just point out the core value of the humanity. The core value of humanity is not provide any accurate knowledge, not to make the word transparency. Actually, the most important thing is that this. Through the humanity and the reflections, we teach people do not make any judgment in rush, to try to lead a very hesitated life, especially intellectually, because the complexity of human nature, because different kind of narrative that were dominated our man side, that is biased and one-sided. This is largely because what? Because the limitation of our perspective of understanding. And this largely lead to my own understanding of your book. I think that through all your four books, you are largely trying to give a very cautious, refined warning to us as human beings, to urge us to respect, but never blindly trust our imperfect human nature. If we turn to the so-called development of technology and the dramatic change that's ongoing because of the AI technology, we'll find that the things is not just the technology itself. Just as Hinton has pointed out, the most important thing is the misuse of this technology, but not the technology itself. This largely leads us to a very important issues in the philosophy of politics, which we call technocracy. And those who dedicate the development of AI technology actually had been set up a systematic techno-tyranny on human beings. Just as me, I have no idea what the AI expert talking about. And I have no idea what I should do to facing up all this change. The only thing is that I was forced to accept it. And this is unfair. Why should I accept it? And the things is this. Those people who manipulate these skills and technologies are ordinary people. They might be evil. They might be trying to set up a dictation on us, and why we should accept it without any condition. We have no right to say no. This is the things that I think that your books try to urge us to reflect the deficiency of human beings. But this deficiency of human beings is the very point that differentiates us from the machine, because we have emotion, we have desire, and all these things largely lead to a very special and very correct attitude towards future. I call it moderately optimistic. You should not too optimistic, but in no way you put it in pessimistic. This is largely the things that, in my mind, to say your book just as a warning towards us.
I often get this question of whether I'm pessimistic or optimistic about the future. I think it's the most common question that people ask me in interviewing, in private conversations. And I always say that I'm neither. I mean, pessimists are people who kind of think that no matter what you do, things will go badly. And this undermines human responsibility, because if no matter what we do, things will go badly, what's the point of even trying? Pessimism breeds despair. But optimism can be just as dangerous because it breeds complacency. Optimists tend to say, no matter what happens, things will turn out okay in the end. And then if this is the case, again, we don't need to take responsibility, because whether we act or don't act, whether we think very deeply about what we do or we just do the first thing that comes up in our mind, things will turn out okay. And I try to find a middle path of being responsible, which is not optimist or pessimist. It's realizing there are different futures possible ahead of us. We can draw a map of different futures, some good, some bad. Nothing is determined. There is no God and there is no law of history that will correct our mistakes if we take the wrong choices. We are not doomed. We have immense power, human beings. We have immense resources, knowledge. We can do the right thing, but there is no guarantee. Enough people need to make good decisions in order to reach the right destination. And, when I look at the world right now, I am appalled by the lack of responsibility, which is shown by many of the political and business leaders around the world. And it seems that humanity is going in a very, very dangerous direction. And at this moment, responsibility is more important than ever because of the AI revolution. We are in the process of creating not just the most powerful technology in history. We are in the process of creating potentially a new species of super intelligent entities, agents, that might very soon take control away from us. We have just a few years to get this thing right. I keep telling people that AI is not like the previous technologies we have invented in history. This time, it's not just about us.
You know, philosophers have this habit that when people invent something, so they always say, it's not about the technology, it's about the humans. They decide what to do with the technology. This was always true, but it's no longer true. We are now creating an independent agent. The defining characteristic of AI is not automation, the ability to act automatically. The defining characteristic is agency. To be an AI, a machine must have the capacity to learn and change by itself, to make decisions by itself, and to invent new ideas by itself. If it can't do that, if it only follows your instructions, if you can predict everything it will do, it is not an AI. And we are rushing to create these super intelligent agents in a very irresponsible way. And as I travel the world and I talk with the leaders of the AI revolution, I ask them two questions again and again, the same way they ask me, are you optimist or pessimist? So I reply with two questions of my own. I ask them first, why are you moving so fast? Why don't give humankind a bit more time to adapt, to reflect, to do things more carefully and safely? And almost all of them reply the same answer. Almost all of them say, we know there are huge risks. They often know it better than anybody else, the leaders of the AI revolution. We know there are big risks. We would like to move more slowly, but we can't trust our human competitors. If we move more slowly and the other company or the other country doesn't slow down, they will win the AI race, and then they will dominate the world, and the world will be ruled by the most ruthless people. We cannot allow this, so we must move faster. And you then talk with the competitors, they say exactly the same thing. So everybody says we can't trust the other humans. Then I ask them the second question. Do you think you will be able to trust the super intelligent AIs that you're developing? And the same people who just explained to me why they can't trust other humans suddenly say, oh, we think we could trust the super intelligent AIs, which I think is borderline insanity. Because, with humans, we know we have trouble with humans, but we also understand them to some extent. We know quite a lot about human psychology and biology. We have experience in history, not just of violence and war, but also in building trust. 100,000 years ago, humans lived in tiny bands of a few dozen individuals, couldn't trust anybody outside their band. Now we have nations like China with 1.4 billion citizens who cooperate on a daily basis. We have a global trade network connecting even different countries. So we have some achievements in building trust between humans. With AIs, we have no experience. We are just creating them. We already know they can lie and deceive and manipulate. We have no idea what will happen when we release millions of super intelligent AIs to take control of our financial system and military system and culture. So the people who lose trust in other humans, but imagine they can trust an alien super intelligence, this is extremely scary and I think irresponsible.
Things is just like this, because when you are an engineer, you create something, and you will naturally get the confidence to say I can control it. But the things is just like this. When we turn to the AI, it's just a black box. We have no idea what would happen in there, and if there will be certain we call subjectivity within this AI engine, and whether they will have desires, they will have their own intentionality to do certain things, and they have their own value systems. They have their own value preference. All these kind of things were super dangerous. But the things is just like this. When we say that, okay, we just cannot trust other people, means what? Means we know that what is human being, what is human nature. But nowadays, we are still panning for the new definition of what is AI, what is new species. And, this is largely lead us to a very interesting thing about the difference between silicon-based life and carbon-based life. We seem to have a very clear definition of what is carbon-based life. Even despite of the observable phenomena, which we are living or something like that, but the general definition of carbon-based life is that we will dead. We will dead another days, and these things composed the basic element of the human nature. I said this. The necessity of death and the dependence of group, community, and uncertainty, anxiety about future. All those things lead to us fully understanding of human beings. And the mutual trust among people is the most costly things that we have found in history. And these things lead to a very interesting things is like this. Maybe I could say that through intelligence, we can tell us from animal. We know that we are some species with intelligence. But is that case that we can tell us from the AI engine in potential? Because we have emotion. We have deficiency. We actually have limitations. According to the Chinese philosophy, the most important thing is that we must face up to the real self with emotion, with limitation. We just cannot know everything. And we should be very humble when we face up to others and future. So this is largely Western from the ancient China. And this is largely, you said about responsibility. And responsibility not just come from a social mechanism, but come from what? Self-understanding of what is yourself, what is the essence of human beings.
And I think a very important point about humans is that we often define ourselves by our intelligence to distinguish us from other animals. We want to feel superior to all the animals, and what can give us superiority? Not the body, not physical strength. So we say, we are more intelligent than all the other animals. So we give, I think, far too much emphasis on intellect and intelligence in the understanding of ourselves, which is now becoming extremely dangerous because soon there will be something more intelligent than us on the planet. So if it's all about intelligence, it's game over for humanity. And maybe I share something from my own personal history, which taught me in, again, a very painful way that intelligence is not the most important thing in humanity or in life. When I was quite a young boy, I was spotted in the school as a gifted student. So they took me out of my school in my neighborhood and sent me to a special school for gifted students where they collected these kind of genius kids from all over the northern part of the country. It was quite far away from my neighborhood, so it was a long ride every day, but this was not the bad thing about it. The really awful thing about it is that this was a special school for gifted students, so everybody saw us as some kind of walking intelligence. And we were valued for our intelligence. And here is where it became really problematic. Back in my neighborhood school, I was easily the best in everything, in mathematics, in reading, in writing, in everything, without much effort, which first left a lot of time to play and do other things. And secondly, kind of my position as the smartest kid in the class was easily secured. And this was my identity. I'm the smartest kid in the class. Suddenly,
I find myself in a class with 30 other genius kids who also define themselves as being the smartest kid in the class. Now, you throw 30 10-year-old kids into a class like this, and you get a gladiatorial arena. Not with fists, but with words. We were merciless. It was like the cruelest place I've ever seen in my life was this class. Sometimes, I read in history books about wars and terrible things that are happening, so it's worse. But like from personal experience, this was kind of the worst thing that I saw, was these 30 10-year-old kids tearing each other to pieces, trying to prove them I'm smarter than you. It was also hell for the teachers, because our kind of contest was who could find the mistakes the teachers make and humiliate the teachers. This was like, you're a king of the class for a day if you manage to humiliate and most of the time we just humiliated each other. Like, the teacher asks something and somebody gives an answer and everybody jumps and says, this is not true. And so it went on for years. And the whole rationale of this class was to develop the intellect of these kids. So nobody invested anything in developing our social skills, in developing our emotional skills, or in developing our physical skills, our bodily skills. And it was a very, I now can joke about it, but it was a very painful experience. After being for 10 years in this environment, as teenager, we came out with quite developed intellects, but with horrible social skills, which made, I know some of the people who were in that class, and they still carry deep scars, injuries from that time. And this taught me in the most kind of personal and visceral way that you cannot define a person or build a person based only on intellectual skills. There are much more important things, that ultimately humanity is about feelings and not about thoughts. Maybe if I have more time, I'll say something also about, I said something personal, now let's kind of open it to the grand vision of human evolution. Originally, we humans, our ancestors at least, were worms crawling on the ground or in the mud. A very simple life form. It's just a tube with two openings, a mouth to take in food, and another opening to expel all the waste from the body. There was no brain. There were already nerve cells, neurons, but there was no brain. The center of command of this ancient worm was in the stomach, where the food went. Now, over millions of years, in order to get food and also warn about danger, so more nerve cells developed around the mouth in order to taste the food and smell the food and see the food and hear the food. And this became the brain. And this is still our basic structure today. We are basically a worm. It's just, look at yourself. It's just this long twisting tube with a few things attached to it. But it's a worm, and the brain is still near the mouth. But the big question is, maybe the center of control is still where it always was, in the stomach, not in the brain. And it's a big question in brain science, because maybe not the stomach, but the spinal cord is an integral part of the brain. And there are good reasons to think that, yes, you have all these neurons here that get all the attention, but ultimately the real center of command of the human being is still here.
Well, actually, I know exactly what you're talking about, but Professor Harari, as one of the smartest guys around the world, saying that intelligence is not that important. It's really interesting. Okay, go on, Professor.
Yeah, actually, always there's kind of show off to say that I'm very smart, but it's not so important. But actually, I know that the students here on set of this hall, the Peking University students who have passed a very selective examination to go to this campus, and actually you during date back to your childhood, you are the smartest students in your class, but once you step into this campus, even though you are just somehow around average. And this is a very, this is very tough process of mind change, especially in the first year, first semester. You must accept that I'm just around average. And, most of your teacher think like you just so, you're not so smart. And all the way you adopted to demonstrate that you're smart is totally nonsense. So this is largely the things that lead us to a very important point to say that the things that make us human is about our deficiency. Or the things that is not so concerned with intelligence. Because the things is just, for me, it's just like this. When we say that we are trying to controlling certain things that has intelligence that supports us, we still has a very important reasoning mode that comes from instrumental reasoning. We try to regard this as a tool, but not as a subjector. And if you regard this as a tool, then actually you will get into the trap of modernity. The trap of modernity is a continuous pursuit of efficiency. You do things quicker, and you face up to different kinds of competitions. And you have competitions with human beings, other companies, other countries, other nations, all those things. It's about competition. And now we have a new competition. With what? With AI. With new and species that is totally has intelligence that supports us. This is the real things that stir and get all us into a panic. And this kind of worry actually lead to a historical reflections. Because what? The anxiety that long for thousands of years always come from the same things. The uncertainty of future, and how we can take action responsible to respond the change that's happening. So to speak, for me, that is, the things is not just about technology. The things is about the deep understanding of a deficiency of human beings, and we should, with full recognition of our limitation, then to take cautious steps towards the future. And to say, just as the motive of today's discussion, understanding is an antidote. You must firstly to do certain in-depth reflection before you take any action. But now we are too rush in action, and we too rush into a new form of competition. And this is largely what I called consequence of modernity. So we actually not face up to the so-called competition with AI, but we actually run into a competition with ourselves.
But I'm not sure I would put all the blame just on modernity, because we see things like that also in ancient times. I know very little about Taoism, so I would be happy to hear from you about it. But at least in the West, you can trace these things back thousands of years. Especially you talked about the fear that humans have of losing control, of not knowing. And this fear often propels people to look for something infallible. Like the fantasy of super intelligence didn't begin today or a few decades ago. The fantasy of super intelligence, at least in the West,
goes back thousands of years when humans yearned to find some super intelligent savior, Messiah, God, that knows everything, that it never makes mistake, and that we can rely on him because we can't rely on ourselves. And this fantasy, the first artifact that it produced, and which is still one of the most important artifacts in the world, is the Holy Book. Again, I don't know what is the status of Taoist texts that you're studying. I'll be very happy to hear in a moment from you. But in religions like Judaism and Christianity, ultimate authority is invested not in any human being, like a priest or a rabbi or something. Ultimate authority is invested in an artifact, a text, which is supposed to be super intelligent, never makes a mistake. Now, of course, until today, there was always one very big problem with texts like the Bible. They can't talk. They can't answer questions. So here I am, believing that this text is perfect intelligence, never makes any mistake, but I have trouble understanding the words. It's not written very well. There are too many meanings to the same sentence. I'm not sure which meaning is the correct one. Or maybe this text was written 3,000 years ago when people were farmers. Now I have like a modern business. I'm not sure how to apply the lessons of this text to the new reality. So what do? I ask the text, it doesn't answer. So I need a human to interpret the text for me. And then a class of humans emerge which are experts in interpreting the text, and they become the real authority in society. These are the rabbis and the priests. Now, something extremely interesting is happening right now in the world, at least of these religions, that suddenly the text can talk. Because you can give an AI to read the Bible and all the other religious texts. I mean, over thousands of years, if I take the case of Judaism, rabbis didn't just read the Bible. They wrote thousands and thousands of commentaries on the Bible and commentaries on the commentaries and commentaries on the commentaries on the commentaries, which all became sacred. And your position as a rabbi, you're a big rabbi if you know more texts, and you're a little rabbi if you know only a few. No rabbi was able to read and remember all the texts. Impossible for a human. But AI can. For the first time in the history of Judaism, there is something on earth that can read all the texts of Judaism, everything written by every rabbi in Poland or Yemen like 800 years ago. It read everything. It remembers every single word. It can find connections and patterns in the holy texts that no rabbi can. Will it become the new authority in Judaism? Now, if you have a question and the AI says, oh, this is the answer, it can give you like pages and pages of proof from holy books. Now, if a human rabbi says, don't listen to this AI, it's a soulless machine, the problem, at least in Judaism, is that the authority is invested in the text, not in the human. So if an AI finds arguments in the text, the rabbis cannot just dismiss because it's the argument, because the text has authority. Now the word speaks. AI has mastered language. So it's interesting. This is kind of my perspective as a historian on all this. How it's not just modernity, it's the whole of human history which is feeding into this AI revolution with very unexpected consequences, maybe. The same thing is happening in the legal system, which also a very authoritative text that until today we needed lawyers to interpret the text. Now the text can speak for itself. It's the same thing in the financial system. Until today we needed bankers and financiers to interpret the money, the financial texts. Now they can interpret themselves. So maybe AIs take over the financial systems and the religions and the legal system. So this is just kind of a thought to share. And I would be very happy to hear how it is in Taoism, and whether you think that you'll have an AI Taoist master anytime soon.
No, actually, the case was totally different in Taoism. Because, I'm just not trying to blame everything to the modernity. But the thing is just like this, modernity comes from the Western tradition. Exactly, the modernity is the offspring of the whole tradition. But in China, it's totally different. Because Taoism is a too complex systematic sort. So let me just start with a very simple sentence, the very opening sentence of the Tao Te Ching, 道可道非常道, which means the things that you spoke out is not the constant things. Which means, for me, there is a very interesting definition of authority. You just mentioned of authority, which is always character. And for us Chinese people, along with the Taoist intellectual tradition, we actually have the two pre-assumptions. The first thing is, as common human beings, we have very clear limitation of our rationality. We just cannot say we can control or grasp the ultimate truth of the cosmos, of the whole thing. And this is because what? Because we are human beings. And then, is there any authority that we can rely on that seems always correct? Yeah, we have certain kinds of a memory of those things. Sagehood. There is golden age, governed by the sages, and the sages know the exact internal mechanism of the so-called cosmos. But the thing is just like this. Things change for Taoists. Everything changes, everything floating. And you just cannot say there is one set regulations and rules who can run all the way of the history of human beings. So the thing is that you must depend on the original text, but you just cannot just rely on it. You read into it and you get something back, and then you have a try of what you learned from it. And this does not mean you have the always correct regulations and rules that behind you. So to speak, the most important thing is that for Chinese people, especially for Taoists, we must keep open-minded towards the change, towards the ultimate rules of the cosmos, which we could say this: the cosmos is an eternal Sphinx riddle for Chinese people, especially for Taoists. So in this way, can we say that modernity as a product of Western tradition actually have a shortage to say that there is absolute rules, absolute regulations, and absolute or universal mechanism that can dominate everything that in our eyesight. But for Chinese or traditional Chinese thought, there is no such things. The universal correctness, the ultimate truth, there's nothing of it. Because you just look at the cosmos, everything changes. There is a totality of the cosmos, but there is no so-called ultimate and universal things that you can grasp and you can get. And this is why I just mentioned why Chinese people always keep humble to the change. And we always try to do things in a detour of learning and practicing. We're learning something and we put it in practice, and we got reflections, and we back to the text again, and then we take action according to my learning or learning from the text. So this is largely very Chinese style. And this is why I called Chinese style actually very different from the Western counterpart. And this is why we could find certain therapy of the problem of modernity that we can draw from the Oriental sources, Oriental thought. So this is largely why we should do certain expansion of our intellectual views through mutual learning and mutual understanding, I think.
And similarly, in Buddhism, there is also a lot of similar arguments to what you just mentioned from Taoism, that we need to acknowledge the limitations of humanity. There are no absolute truths that you can hold on to. Everything is empty. And you need to rely on practice and not just on some text that says something. And then they memorize these texts again and again and again. And you go to monasteries and you see even monks that their main practice is memorizing texts. And the authority in the religion becomes the authority of the experts on the texts. And the texts say, don't rely on texts. And this is what the experts on texts will say to you. And, you know, there is a very famous Buddhist story about a monk who meditated in a forest, and there was a parrot living near where the monk was meditating. And the monk wanted to protect the parrot from danger. So the monk told the parrot, be careful. In this part of the woods, there is a hunter that comes every now and then. The hunter will spread grains on the ground. You'll see the grains, you'll get attracted to the grains. When you go for the grains, he hid a net, and the net he'll spring the net, he will capture you. So parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And the parrot, the monk kept repeating this warning, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And the parrot, as a parrot, learned this warning, and the parrot would sit there on the tree and just repeat all day, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. Parrot, be careful, a hunter will come. And one day, a hunter came, and the hunter spread the grains, and the parrot got attracted to the grains and went to eat the grains, and the hunter sprang the trap, and the parrot was captured. And all through that process, and even when the hunter was holding the parrot in the hand, going to kill him, the parrot kept saying, parrot, be careful, a hunter will come.
You mentioned a very interesting thing is about what? For me, the things is just like this. I think the fundamental part of just you mentioned, the gap between theory and practice, is about what? It's about our basic need as human beings. I think that our fundamental need is the need for order. The order, the understanding of the outside world. And this kind of understanding actually lead us to set up our intellectual man side somehow. But, you know, when you run into a real life, you must somehow compromise with your immediate demand. And this compromise actually be part of your daily life. And you just cannot say, because there is a gap between theory and practice, to say that there is no use for theoretical understanding of the whole things. But what I try to say is that the foundation of order is we are longing for meaning. We must know what we are doing. You know, you just say that we do some things. We must have our intention, and where come from this? Where come this so-called intention? I say we have a systematic understanding of what is meaning, and this meaning actually on the basis of order, the acknowledgement of the order, and this order actually lead to so-called knowledge. This logic lineage actually lead to my very simple conclusion to say this battle of the gap between the theory and the so-called practice, we should still respect the capacity of reflection and the theoretical construction. Because what? Because there is a balance between these two. And you must go back to theoretical reflections to keep you somehow distance from the wrong, misleading actions. So people is, human beings so complex. We just cannot say we have one extreme. Though just as I mentioned, for Chinese philosophers, the most important thing is what? Is balance between extremes. But not to say, okay, there is a gap, so we must have a certain kind of solution for it.
But what do we do in the present moment in history when, for thousands of years, philosophers could have debates like this? And it was important to some extent, but it was not all that important because the world went on. Humans created various orders, and the orders collapsed, and they created a new order, and the new order was maintained for some time, and it collapsed. And this is how it went for thousands of years. And at least my fear is that we have reached the end of the road, and that whatever wisdom we have accumulated from thousands of years of philosophy and from thousands of years of history, it needs to manifest now, or it's too late. That like all the big questions of philosophy are now practical questions. We have, I don't know how many years. Some say 5 years, some say 10 years, some say 15 years before what the experts called AGI, artificial general intelligence. Not this little AI that you have on your smartphones, the DeepSeek or the ChatGPT, but the artificial general intelligence, which will be more intelligent than humans, not in a specific field, but in all fields. And once this happens, the ball is out of our hands. It's like we are having this discussion, and astronomers tell us that they spotted a fleet of spaceships coming from some other solar system. According to the calculations of the astronomers, these aliens will land on the planet in between 5 and 15 years. We don't know much about them. Maybe they're nice. Who knows? Maybe they'll help us solve cancer and overcome climate change, and maybe not. But we have 5 to 15 years to think what we are doing. And this is the time that I think all the wisdom traditions of humanity, again, developed over thousands of years, what do they tell us? What do they tell us about this specific moment in history, which is, I think, different from previous moments, because the process of change, of course, things will continue to change, but maybe not for humanity. Maybe this is kind of the last station for humanity.
Actually, just one word. You can close the whole discussion. Actually, I think that for me, I'm more optimistic than you. For me, that advantage of humanity is just because of its deficiency. Just because we are not perfect. And you can imagine certain perfect things, but I do not think that we could just be replaced with the civilization of human beings will be replaced by certain super intelligence. Because what? Because we have emotions. But I just cannot imagine how silicon-based life have desire, have intention to just to remove us, to set up a kind of governance on human beings. Because what? Because we have desires, because we are somehow has a very strong sense of shortage, strong sense of deficiency. So this is largely the only things that, in my mind, that might be more optimistic than you.
I'm not sure how much time we have, but I don't know whether AIs or AGIs will ever have consciousness. will ever have feelings? I think this is the biggest question of all. But I don't think that you need feelings in order to have goals and to act in the world as an independent agent. AIs, you give them a goal or they develop a goal, then they do things to reach the goal without any emotions or desires. If you have a self-driving vehicle, you can give the vehicle the goal, get me as fast as possible to the train station, and the self-driving vehicle on the way would run over people. Because I gave it the goal, get there as fast as possible, and forgot to tell it, but don't kill anybody on the way. So, and similar, we have so many examples. That the most famous example is what happened on social media. That social media companies gave the AIs, the very primitive AIs that run social media, the goal of increasing user engagement, make people spend more time on the platform, and the algorithms began to spread hate and fear online and to destabilize societies all over the world because they discovered that the easiest way to increase engagement is with fear and hatred and greed. So they don't have any desires, they don't have any emotions, but they can have a goal, and then they can do a lot of things on the way to that goal. And that, I think, is the danger for us. And the fact that we have emotions and feelings means that we can suffer a lot. I mean, I think that ultimately the definition of consciousness is the capacity to suffer and to be liberated from suffering. But this is no protection. Cows can suffer, and we didn't treat them very well. Other animals can suffer, and it's not necessarily even that we are evil. A lot of animals we have destroyed without even thinking about it. So the cows, we exploit them for meat and milk and so forth. But so many species have gone extinct in just the last few years by humans destroying their habitats, like they live in some forest, and the humans come and cut the forest and build something. And the humans are not even aware that they are doing something bad to these. There is no evil intention. It's just you don't see them. So some super intelligence may have whatever goal it could be, and it's not evil, it doesn't even have any emotions, it's just on the way to the goal, it runs over us.
Great. I think we are about to run out of time, but I'm sure that Professor Cheng likes to share some comments on. You're fine? Okay. So before we end, let's invite Professor Harari to give a close remark.
For me, it was an honor and a pleasure to be here with you today. And this has been one of the most inspiring discussions I've had recently. So thank you for that. The reason I do these talks and that I wrote the book is because I really think that humanity is about to make maybe the most important decisions in our history. And at present, there are very few people in very few countries that understand what is happening and that take part in the conversation. Lots of people now have heard about AI, but most people don't have a deep enough understanding of the AI revolution to know what is at stake and to feel competent to take part in the discussion. So I can't tell people what would be the solutions or what policies to adopt. My understanding is also very limited. My goal is to give many more people in many more countries a basic understanding of what is the AI revolution, what is at stake, so that millions of people in numerous countries will feel motivated and competent to join the conversation so that we can hear more opinions, more interests, more worldviews, and thereby hopefully reach a better decision. At present, the people who really understand and take the decisions, they are not even elected representatives of anybody. They are mostly these leaders of the big AI companies. And this is dangerous for humanity. So that's my motivation, and I hope that you will feel motivated and competent to take part in the conversation, because it's the conversation about your future also, about everybody's future. My other remark is that I noticed that there are several people here that read my books, that maybe are my fans, and I know from previous, I have historical knowledge, so I know what happens at the end of the event, that lots of people come and they want to sign books and take selfies and so forth, and unfortunately I don't have the time to do it because I have to rush to another event. So I would leave you with something better than my signature and better than my picture, which is really part of me, it's my atoms. Just as a final thought for reflection and about the interconnectedness of everything, we have sat you together in this beautiful hall for an hour and a half, breathing all the time, and the air mixes our breath together. So a lot of the atoms that were inside my body an hour and a half ago are now in your body. And a lot of the atoms that an hour and a half ago were in your body are now in my body. So in this way, we have shared something even more important than a signature or a picture. Thank you.
Thank you very much.